Today, my husband Tom and I were at my sister-in-law's house for my nephew's birthday party. When it was time to eat, my sister-in-law Julia served everyone takeout sushi, but for some reason there wasn't any for me. As I looked confused, Julia said something shocking.
We didn't invite anyone who's not family, so don't just come over uninvited.
Tom was furious at these words and grabbed my arm, and we both stormed out of Julia's house. But right after that, something shocking happened to Julia's family, and she collapsed to her knees. My name is Lisa James, and I'm 33 years old. I was a nurse and met my husband Tom, who is also a nurse, at the hospital. Tom is gentle, kind, and always puts others before himself. I was immediately drawn to him, and I asked him out for a meal. Tom happily accepted my invitation, and we went out to eat several times. Over time, Tom started to like me too, and we naturally began dating. One day, we were at a restaurant with a beautiful night view. As we enjoyed a delicious meal, Tom took out a small box with a ring from his pocket and proposed to me. Of course, I said yes, and we became husband and wife. When we got married, I decided to quit my job to support Tom, who worked shifts. I became a stay-at-home wife.
Lisa, the meals you make are the best.
Tom always praised my cooking and actively helped with house chores. He's a wonderful husband. After we got married, Tom's father passed away due to illness, leaving only his mother, Mary. Mary has been very kind to me and treats me like her own daughter. I love Mary very much and often have meals and go out with her. My parents divorced when I was a baby, and I was raised by my father. I never got to experience a mother's kindness. Sometimes, when talking with Mary, I think this is what it might have been like if my parents didn't get a divorce. After Tom's father passed away, Mary seemed lonely, so I suggested to Tom that we could live together. Tom agreed, and we started preparing to live with Mary. However, Julia was strongly against us living with Mary.
I can't let Mom live in a house with strangers.
Julia said this to me. We had just gotten married and didn't know each other well, so perhaps it was natural for her to think of me as a stranger. Though I felt a little sad, I understood. Julia wanted to live with Mary, so we decided to leave Mary in her care. Julia's family moved into the house that Tom's father had left behind to live with Mary.
I know Mom best, so leave her to me.
That's what Julia said, but I noticed Mary looked a bit uneasy. Is everything okay, Mary? When I asked, Mary hesitated a bit before saying it's nothing. I thought she might be feeling lonely after Tom's father passed away, so I started visiting Julia's house more often. Julia and her husband both work, and their 4-year-old son, Kyle, is in daycare. This leaves Mary alone during the day. Whenever I visited, Mary always welcomed me with a smile.
Thank you, Lisa, for always coming by. Thanks to you, every day is more enjoyable.
No, thank you for always being there to talk to me. Mary's words made me happy. Being a stay-at-home wife and doing housework, I rarely had the chance to go out. Talking with Mary became my only pleasure. But then one day, when I rang the intercom at Julia's house as usual, Julia came out instead of Mary.
Oh, it's Lisa. Do you need something from us?
Julia glared at me with sharp eyes. I just wanted to talk to Mary for a bit. Julia clicked her tongue.
What could you possibly have to talk about with her? You're not related by blood, and she has nothing to say to you.
Julia said this as she tried to close the door. At that moment, Mary appeared from behind Julia and said,
Lisa, I've got some delicious sweets. Why don't you come in?
Despite Julia's displeased look, she let me into the house.
I took the day off because I had things to do. I'll be back by evening, so Mom, please take care of Kyle. Also, be careful with his food because of his allergies.
Julia said this and left in a hurry. After Julia left, Mary looked apologetic and said,
I'm sorry, Lisa. She's always so overbearing.
It's okay, I don't mind. By the way, are you handling everything in the house by yourself? Concerned by Julia's words, I decided to ask Mary directly. Mary sighed deeply.
Yes, that's right. Julia says she's busy with work and does nothing around the house. Not only that, but she also leaves everything about Kyle to me. I'm so tired.
Mary looked truly exhausted. Julia was leaving all the housework to Mary, treating her almost like a maid. Being a stay-at-home wife with plenty of time, I decided to help Mary as much as I could. When I told Tom about it at home, he looked concerned and sighed.
My sister has always been like that, bossing people around. She was awful when we were kids, too. I can't believe she's treating Mom like a maid.
Tom was angry. Tom and Julia never got along well, even as kids. Julia used to bully Tom just like she does now. I know she's busy working full-time, but she asks too much of your mom. I'll help her as much as I can. Tom smiled kindly at me.
Thank you, really. But don't overdo it.
It's for the family. It's the right thing to do. We should help each other. That night, as we were watching TV, Mary called with some surprising news.
There's a parent observation day at Kyle's daycare tomorrow, but everyone else's mom is coming, and I think Kyle will feel bad if I go. Could you come with me instead?
Surprised, I asked, "Isn't Julia going to attend?" Mary sighed heavily over the phone.
She said she can't take time off work. It's an important day for Kyle, and I don't know what she's thinking.
I understand. I'll go with you. Mary seemed pleased and ended the call with a happy tone. I thought that even if she is working, she should take time off for her child's day. Kyle probably wants his mom to come too. But Julia must have her own way of thinking. I decided to put my feelings aside. The next day, I headed over to Julia's house at the time Mary had asked. On the way, I bought some snacks that Kyle might like and nervously opened the door. Mary was waiting for me by the entrance.
I'm sorry for bothering you today.
No, I'm just at home doing nothing, so it's fine. But are you sure Kyle will be okay with me coming?
Kyle loves you, Lisa. He'll be happy to see you.
Hearing that, I felt relieved and headed to the daycare with Mary. The daycare was filled with mothers. Mary and I mingled in and carefully watched Kyle's activities. At some point, Kyle noticed us, waved, and smiled. I waved back with a smile. He looked so angelic. On the way back, Kyle ran up to us.
Lisa, I'm so happy you came. Let's play a lot when we get home.
I couldn't help but smile. Sure, I'll think of something fun for us to do. Kyle looked thrilled and ran back to his friends.
See, I told you, he likes you.
I'm glad. He's such a friendly child. Kyle was always warm and approachable with me. Every time we met, he would say, "Let's play, Lisa," and we would often play like children together. After the observation, parents and children were supposed to go home together. I held Kyle's hand and walked back to Julia's house. I gave Kyle the snacks I bought, and he was so happy. If anyone saw us, they'd probably think we were a mother and child. As we approached Julia's house, Kyle's expression turned gloomy. Suddenly, he started crying. I was confused and didn't understand why Kyle was crying.
I wanted to play with Lisa more.
Don't say that. Lisa will be in trouble if you do.
I don't like Grandma. I want Lisa.
Mary looked helpless. Shall we play a little longer? Originally, I planned to go straight home after the observation, but since Kyle insisted, we decided to play a little longer. While playing, time flew by and soon it was dinner time. We needed to head back before Julia returned and possibly said something. But Mary looked tired, so I decided to make dinner before leaving. Kyle, what do you want to eat?
Hamburger. I want a big one.
So I quickly made a big hamburger with the ingredients in the fridge. Kyle has an egg allergy, so I cooked without eggs. I drew a face with ketchup on his hamburger, and Kyle was ecstatic. Eat a lot, okay? I have to go, but let's play again soon.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's have some tea and sweets together again soon.
Mary stood up to see me off. Kyle looked a bit sad. At that moment, we heard the front door open.
I'm home.
It was Julia's husband, Jack. Jack is a quiet person, quite the opposite of Julia, and doesn't talk much. Though I've known him for a year, we haven't talked much. I felt a bit nervous. I'm sorry to be here so late. I'll leave now.
No, thank you. It's actually my wife's responsibility, but I appreciate it. Kyle seems really happy too.
I had so much fun playing with Lisa today.
That's good to hear.
Jack smiled at Kyle. I was about to leave, but I ran into Julia at the doorway.
What are you doing here again?
Julia glared at me.
I asked her to come today. She even came to Kyle's daycare observation with me. Look, she even made this hamburger.
However, Julia's anger didn't subside. She picked up the plate with a hamburger. I had no idea what she was going to do, but in the next moment she threw the whole plate in the trash. Everyone froze, even Kyle, who was speechless. Jack hurriedly opened the trash can and picked up the plate and hamburger.
What are you doing? Lisa worked hard to make this.
Jack was trembling with anger. But Julia didn't reflect on her actions and snapped at Jack.
How dare you talk to me like that? I make just as much, if not more, than you do. Show some respect.
Jack fell silent. Jack works in a factory, and although they are both working, Julia earns more, so Jack can't stand up to her. Feeling defeated, Jack became silent. I'm sorry for doing things on my own. I'll leave now. Julia clicked her tongue.
How dare you step into my kitchen without permission? I won't forgive you if you do this again.
I hurriedly apologized and left. On the way home, tears wouldn't stop flowing. What I thought was the right thing for Kyle and Mary ended up angering Julia. I wanted to get along with Tom's family, but why does everything go wrong? I was overwhelmed with frustration. When I got home, the lights were already on. Tom had returned from work and was cooking dinner. Seeing my tear-streaked face, Tom rushed over.
Lisa, what happened?
I told Tom everything. His face turned red with anger.
Julia again? I'll call her and say something.
I quickly stopped Tom. I don't want things to get worse with your sister. Hearing my words, Tom put down the phone and hugged me.
I'm always on your side, no matter what.
I was deeply grateful to Tom for being there for me. I felt genuinely glad to have married Tom. For a while, I stopped going to Julia's house. I was afraid of getting scolded by Julia again. As time passed, I thought that maintaining a little distance might be the best. Suddenly, my phone rang. I was shocked to see Julia's name on the screen. Hesitantly, I answered the call.
Next week is Kyle's birthday. We're having a party, so make sure to tell Tom to come.
I was stunned. After all that anger, Julia was now suddenly inviting us to a birthday party? Okay, I'll let him know, I said softly.
And don't forget the birthday present,
Julia added quickly before hanging up. I stood there in disbelief for a while. I told Tom, and he seemed visibly unhappy.
I feel like there's something more to this.
Yes, but it's for Kyle. Let's go. We decided to attend Kyle's birthday party. On the day of the party, Tom and I brought a gift for Kyle and went to Julia's house.
Welcome. I'm so glad to see you.
It had been a month since I'd last seen Mary, and she looked somewhat worn out. I wanted to ask her if something was wrong, but Julia's loud voice echoed.
Close the door quickly, or bugs will get in.
I quickly closed the door. Tom's face was already filled with anger. When we entered the living room, Kyle looked happy and said,
Lisa, let's play.
I handed him the present we brought. Happy birthday, Kyle! Kyle immediately opened the present and shouted with joy.
Hey, this is a toy I wanted! Mom, look!
Kyle excitedly showed Julia the gift, but she scoffed.
What a cheap-looking toy!
Julia actually commented on the price of the present. I was too shocked to speak.
You two don't even have kids, so you must have plenty of money. You could have gotten Kyle a better toy.
Even Tom seemed too stunned to respond.
But this is what I wanted. Don't be mean to Lisa.
Kyle glared at Julia. Julia, seemingly upset by Kyle's words, started yelling.
If you love Lisa so much, why don't you become her kid?
Julia's face looked like a demon's and Kyle began to cry. Jack silently picked up Kyle and tried to comfort him. Why is Julia so arrogant? How could she say such a cruel thing to her own child? I was starting to get frustrated. At that moment, the doorbell rang.
Lisa, the sushi delivery is here. Could you get it?
Sure. I went to the door. When I opened it, the sushi delivery guy was there.
There are 5 sets, 1 kid's sushi set and 4 adult sushi sets.
I thought there must be a mistake. I quickly asked Julia. Weren't there supposed to be 6 sets? There are only 4 adult sets.
That's correct.
Julia paid for the sushi. I found it strange, but didn't think too much of it and paid the delivery man. The dining table was filled with dishes Mary had prepared in addition to the sushi for the party. Julia asked everyone to take their seats. I was about to sit, but there was no chair for me. Tom tried to offer me his seat, but Julia quickly intervened.
Lisa, that's Tom's seat. Yours is over there.
Julia pointed to a sofa table and told me to sit there by myself. Everyone seemed confused, but Julia continued.
Our dining table is small, so not everyone can sit here. Sorry.
I was sad I couldn't sit with everyone, but if that was the reason, I thought there was nothing I could do. Tom tried to switch seats with me, but I insisted I was fine and sat at the sofa table. Mary served everyone, then brought my portion over, but I noticed I didn't have any sushi. Mary noticed too and asked Julia.
It seems Lisa doesn't have any sushi.
But Julia ignored her. Tom raised his voice.
Julia, Lisa doesn't have any sushi.
Julia started laughing.
We didn't invite anyone who's not family, so don't just come uninvited.
Julia didn't consider me family. I had suspected it from her attitude, but hearing it directly was a shock. Tears started to well up in my eyes. I could only look down. Tom looked furious and said,
Let's go, Lisa.
He grabbed my arm, and we left Julia's house without looking back. When we got home, Tom immediately looked at me.
I'm sorry my sister says such terrible things.
I was grateful that Tom took my side. Tears continued to stream down my face. I felt hurt and angry. Why'd I have to go through this? By nightfall, I had calmed down, but I decided to avoid Julia from now on. I didn't want to feel this sadness again. But that night, Mary called again.
Julia got food poisoning from the sushi and had to be rushed to the hospital. Are you and Tom okay?
And neither of us touched the sushi, I said. Mary seemed relieved. Is Julia okay? What about Jack and Kyle?
Everyone ate the sushi, but only Julia got food poisoning. Kyle said not to waste it, so we ate. He was really worried about you, Lisa.
And please don't worry about me. I'm just glad Kyle is okay. I couldn't believe this had happened. Tom muttered.
Karma for being so mean.
3 days after the incident, the doorbell rang. Who could it be? When I opened the door, there stood Julia, Jack, and Mary. Julia looked completely recovered. Before I could say anything, Julia barged into the house.
How dare you live here? Your house is so small.
Julia kept saying hurtful things. Mary and Jack seemed uncomfortable. What brings you here? I asked, still shocked.
How dare you put bacteria in the sushi? Because of you, I had a horrible time.
Tom, who had been asleep after his night shift, rushed into the living room when he heard Julia shouting. I didn't do anything. I only received the sushi at the door.
Don't lie. I'm going to sue you for damages.
I felt all the strength drain from my body. Why would I have to pay money? Tom glared at Julia.
The food poisoning wasn't Lisa's fault. You got what you deserved for being mean.
I couldn't go to work because of you. My husband had to suffer too. Lisa is truly a curse.
I couldn't believe how much Julia hated me. Tears started flowing again.
That's enough, Julia.
Mary's voice was so loud that the room instantly fell silent.
You're the one who needs to stop, Julia. You dragged Jack and me here today. What are you thinking? Lisa hasn't done anything wrong. Besides, you tried to bring Kyle too.
Julia seemed shocked that her mother was taking my side. Kyle was currently with a childcare worker that Jack knew.
You said you couldn't do anything around the house, but you never did anything in the first place. I've been doing everything. You're a burden to everyone.
Julia started to panic.
But I work all day. It can't be helped. You're just home all day, so you should be doing chores. Those who don't work shouldn't eat.
Mary let out a deep sigh.
Is it really just work? I tried to keep quiet about this, but I can't anymore.
Julia turned pale.
Yes, it's just work. What are you talking about?
I saw you going into an unknown apartment with a man I didn't know.
Julia fell silent. An unknown man? What was going on? Tom and I exchanged glances.
Hey, what's going on here? Is this true?
I wouldn't do that. I was just having tea with a friend.
Mary took out her phone and showed us some pictures. She had apparently taken them when she saw Julia on her way to the supermarket. Jack froze when he saw the pictures. The pictures showed Julia arm in arm with a man walking happily.
This is my friend. He's not your friend.
No, I can explain.
I don't want to hear it. While you were out playing, Mom and I were taking care of Kyle and the house, but all you did was complain.
Jack was furious. After a heated argument, Julia finally admitted her fault.
I was wrong. It was just a fling. You're the one I care about.
I've had enough. I'm leaving. I'll take Kyle with me.
With that, Kyle walked out.
No!
Julia stood there in shock, but after Jack left, she turned to Mary.
How could you tell Jack? I don't need you anymore. Get out of my house.
I don't need to be told twice. I don't want to be around you anymore either. You're the real curse here, Julia. You've been treating me like a maid all this time.
You don't have anywhere else to go. This house is too small for you to live with Tom and Lisa.
Julia kept saying things that irritated me. Tom laughed at Julia's words.
Actually, we're planning to build a new house next year. It'll have a room just for Mom.
This house is small, but we'll manage until then. Tom seemed like he was going to say more, but stopped. Mary took over and continued.
I'm planning to sell this house. It's a place your father left us, but maintaining it costs money. So you should find a new place to live soon.
What? No way.
Julia looked at Mary in disbelief.
Tom, say something. If I lose this house, I'll have nowhere to go.
Why should I say anything? You said Lisa wasn't family, so that means I'm not your family either. Don't rely on me from now on. We're cutting ties with you. Goodbye, and good luck on your own.
Julia collapsed in tears. I felt a bit sorry for her, but she had caused me even more pain. She deserved this. Julia cried for a long time. 6 months later, Julia and Jack's divorce was finalized and Kyle's custody was given to Jack. Before they separated, Kyle gave me a letter. In his clumsy handwriting, he wrote,
"Lisa, let's play again."
Tears wouldn't stop flowing. Children always end up suffering. I hope Kyle and Jack can find happiness. After the divorce, Mary sold the house. Julia lost her place to live and is now living in a small apartment alone. Having relied on Mary to do all the housework, she must be struggling. She tried to contact Mary a few times, but Mary blocked her number. I think it's just karma for not valuing her family.
Come on, the sushi delivery has arrived. Let's eat.
Today we're celebrating our new house, and Mary has ordered high-end sushi. But before that, I had something to tell Mary. Mary, there will be 2 grandchildren by this winter. Mary's eyes widened.
Lisa, are you?
I'm 3 months pregnant. Mary cried tears of joy. I look forward to many happy days with Tom, Mary, and our babies.
My husband said I couldn't live in the house I bought because he wanted to live with his parents. But then, an unexpected twist.
My parents-in-law and my husband Jack made me buy a house because I was doing well with my business. On the day we were supposed to move in, Jack said something shocking. "Starting today, I'm gonna live here with my parents. You can't live in this house." I was betrayed by my husband. I was told to move into my in-laws' now vacant house. I had suspected for months that my husband and my in-laws were up to something behind my back. But I never imagined that they were planning this. Why should I have to support my husband and in-laws by paying for a house I can't even live in? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. But instead of showing my anger, I decided to play along. "Sure, I'll stay in your parents' house then." I pretended to be happy about the arrangement, making my husband and in-laws believe I was content. Without any suspicion, my husband and in-laws moved into the new house. "Keep it tidy, okay? I'll come by for a surprise inspection." "Of course, anytime. I'll be waiting," I replied with a smile. 6 months later, my husband and in-laws showed up unexpectedly for an inspection. They were shocked by what they saw. Immediately, my phone rang. This marked the beginning of my revenge against my husband and in-laws. I was determined to get even. My name is Lisa James. I'm 33 years old and I run my own company. I started with a small budget, targeting young women in their 20s by opening a cute cafe. The cafe was a huge hit, allowing me to expand and open more locations. Eventually, I branched out into cake shops and nail salons, continuously expanding my business. Now, I have a manager in each store, allowing me to focus solely on the business side of things. With more free time, I've picked up various hobbies and I'm thoroughly enjoying my life. One of my hobbies is visiting museums, and it was during one of these visits that I met my husband Jack. Jack was attracted to my vibrant personality and enthusiasm for various things. He asked me out, and I was drawn to his sincerity and kindness. We started dating, and a year later, we got married. I moved into the apartment he had originally rented, and we lived happily together. It's been 2 years since we got married, and our belongings and furniture have started to pile up. I began thinking it might be a good time to buy a new house. "Hey, honey, what do you think about buying a new house?" "Yeah, but moving to a place with higher rent might be tough. Groceries have gotten more expensive too. Maybe we should just stay here a little longer." Jack didn't want to move because he didn't want to cut back on spending for his hobbies. So I made him a proposal. "Right now, you pay the rent and I cover the utilities. Let's switch that around. I'll cover the rent since my business is doing well and you can handle the utilities. How about that?" Jack quickly agreed. "Really? I thought I'd be paying the rent forever. That's why I wasn't keen on moving or buying a new house." Once he realized I'd be covering the rent, he started opening up. "Honestly, I've always felt that since you make more, you could take care of the rent. I'm so glad you suggested it first. Let's go to a realtor and look for a new place." Jack became enthusiastic about buying a new house, and we quickly started looking. At the realtor's office, he eagerly shared his preferences with the agent.
It has to be close to the station, a single-family home, and the bigger the better.
The agent probably thought Jack was wealthy because of his high demands. They likely saw me as just a housewife tagging along. Jack was so excited that he was ready to sign the contract right away. But I insisted on taking the details home to discuss. It's a big purchase, so we should be cautious. I'd also like to get advice from someone with more knowledge about real estate.
Oh, right. My dad has some real estate qualifications. We could ask him.
Jack immediately called his father and asked him to come over.
He said he'd come tomorrow. Let's talk more then.
Tomorrow? That's too soon. I don't even know what to ask.
It's fine. Just ask about everything, including what you don't understand.
He was nonchalant and headed to bed. The next morning, my father-in-law, Brian, arrived early. He barged in even though I was still in my pajamas.
Show me the documents if you're buying a house.
Brian and Jack had an intense discussion about the house over breakfast.
This one's the best option, but can you afford it? No problem. Lisa will pay for it.
As soon as he heard I was paying, Brian chose the most expensive option.
If Lisa's covering it, we might as well get this one. You can easily afford it.
Brian underestimated my work and saw it as easy money. He wasn't committed to finding a house that was worth the price because he wasn't the one paying for it. It was so carelessly handled that I got a bit annoyed. But Jack didn't notice and continued moving the discussion forward.
If Dad thinks it's the best choice, then it must be. Let's go with this one.
Wait a minute. What about my opinion? Both of them paused for a moment, but pretended not to hear me.
I'm calling the realtor now.
When it was just me and Brian, he said something shocking.
Thanks to you, we can move into a bigger house. You're such a good wife.
Excuse me? I had a bad feeling. What did he mean by moving into a bigger house? Were they planning to live with us? I wanted to ask, but was too scared to speak. Jack returned after quickly finishing his call.
I've set everything up with the realtor. We're moving into that house. This way, we can take care of Mom and Dad comfortably.
So they were planning to live together without telling me. Oh, what do you mean?
We've been relying on them all this time. We should take care of them a bit. We bought a big new house, so it's only natural to live together and take care of them.
His expression made it clear he thought this was completely normal. But I'm the one who bought the house. Shouldn't it be my parents that move in?
You said you wanted to buy it, didn't you? We're married, so it doesn't matter whose parents move in.
His response was cold, and we couldn't have a proper conversation. If this kept up, we wouldn't be able to move to the new house with peace of mind, and I wouldn't be able to relax. We argued every day until the moving day. But he was adamant about living together and wouldn't budge. Finally, on the day we were supposed to move in, he took drastic measures.
From today, Mom, Dad, and I will live in the new house. You can stay at my parents' house.
I was being forced out of the house I paid for. Jack, with a smug face, infuriated me. But since I had suspected for days that something was off, I wasn't surprised by his words. Fine, I'll stay at your parents' house starting today. Jack, suspicious of my sudden agreement, added a condition.
Oh, by the way, Dad's still paying off the mortgage. If you're gonna live there, you'll cover the payments, right?
I found out that my in-laws still had about 10 years left on their mortgage. Well, if I'm living there, it's only natural. He quickly called his father to inform him of the new arrangement. Both my husband and in-laws, Brian and Amanda, probably thought they were lucky. They believed I'd be paying for both the new house and the remaining mortgage on their old house. Jack was thrilled about moving into a new, spacious house, unaware of my plans. Shortly after they moved into the new house, I began my plan in the old house. I heard from Jack that you gifted us the new house. How generous. Honestly, I thought you were a terrible daughter-in-law, but this makes up for it. I was stunned by how they twisted the story into a gift. It was annoying to hear such sarcastic remarks from Amanda, even though I supposedly gifted them a new house. But I suppressed my emotions and replied calmly, "Of course, I'll make sure the house is spotless for you both." I managed to keep a straight face while answering them. Unaware of my true intentions, my in-laws moved to the new house. After they left, I had a hectic few months. I was preparing for my revenge against Jack and my in-laws. 6 months later, while enjoying a quiet lunch, I received a call from Jack. I figured they'd finally realized what had happened. I answered the call to hear Jack yelling from the start.
What did you do to my parents' house? What's going on?
I just cleaned it up as you requested. I responded casually, knowing full well what he meant.
That's not what we meant when we said to clean up.
I guess I misunderstood. Silly me. After Jack and my in-laws moved into the new house, I had completely gutted their old one. Since I was now the owner of the old house and they told me to keep it clean, I took it to the extreme. I had no problem spending some money on this. It was worth seeing them suffer for taking over my new house. My sole focus was on making Jack and my in-laws regret their actions. Since I now owned the old house, I could do whatever I wanted with it. You do remember that both of you agreed to this, right? Jack, realizing the situation, started panicking.
You changed the account for the new house mortgage to Dad's, didn't you?
I wondered when you'd notice. I was waiting for your call. Jack had finally addressed the main issue, but Brian overheard and shouted from behind.
How dare you change the account without permission? Who does such a thing?
I didn't change anything. You signed the papers yourself. Don't try to blame me. My simple explanation left both Jack and his father speechless. As expected, I had to clarify everything for them. Remember when you signed the agreements to transfer the old house to me? That's when we switched the mortgage accounts. You signed everything after I explained it to you.
Dad, what have you done? I didn't sign anything like that.
Both of them went pale, realizing that they had no one to blame but themselves. Since you two chose that house, you'll continue to pay for it. It's only fair. If I had even a little say in choosing this house, you'd probably demand I pay a portion of it. I made sure to emphasize that letting them decide everything was the best choice I could have made.
But you were the one who suggested buying the new house in the first place. That's right. And now our retirement fund is almost gone because of you. What are you gonna do about it?
That's rich coming from you. We were supposed to buy a house for just Jack and me. Then you two decided to move in without my consent. I'm not paying for 2 houses when I can't even live in one. I let out all my pent-up frustrations. But Jack and Brian wouldn't back down.
What's the big deal about living together? It was bound to happen sooner or later. After everything they've done for us, it's only right to live with them. Children should look after their parents. Stop complaining.
I sighed, exhausted by their stubbornness. I haven't received any help from you two. I took a deep breath and continued. You didn't even give us a wedding gift. Instead, you demanded money, claiming I took your son away. Every time we visited, you demanded separate gifts for each of you. And now you talk about being indebted and caring for you? What a joke! I shouted out everything I had been feeling from the bottom of my heart. Out of breath, but relieved to have finally said what I needed to, I felt a little lighter. Jack, I didn't marry you to take care of your parents. I will never live with them. If that's the kind of wife you want, let's get a divorce.
Divorce her, Jack. We don't need a woman like her.
Instead of Jack, Brian shouted back. Taking the bait, Jack agreed to the divorce in a fit of emotion.
I'll fill out the papers and send them over right away. I don't want to stay married to you any longer than necessary.
Jack was too emotional to think straight and ended up acting in my favor. To make sure he didn't realize, I carefully navigated the conversation. Despite being at a disadvantage post-divorce, Jack agreed to it. This was thanks to my in-laws urging him to get a divorce. I had always thought of them as rude, inconsiderate people, but for this, I was grateful. I'll handle the paperwork once it arrives. Good luck finding a new partner. I hung up the phone with a sense of satisfaction. It felt great having said everything I wanted. Jack and my in-laws were likely boiling with frustration, but I had blocked their numbers. Not long after, the divorce papers arrived with a bitter letter. Of course I didn't bother reading it and tore it up. What a petty man. If I had known he was like this from the start, I never would have married him. I muttered to myself as I threw the letter in the trash. A few months later, I decided to move to avoid Jack showing up unexpectedly. I had been living in a modest apartment, but this time I bought a luxury condo. Every night, I enjoy a glass of wine while admiring the beautiful night view. I focused on work, breaking sales records every month. Meanwhile, Jack's life took a tragic turn. Initially, they lived off Brian's savings and retirement fund. But the expenses of living in a house beyond their means quickly depleted their funds.
What are we gonna do? We need to move out of this house quickly, or we'll end up in debt.
Jack suggested moving to a cheaper place, but Brian resisted.
Moving out now would make Lisa laugh at us. I won't allow that. We'll stay here.
Brian's pride led them down a path of ruin. They ended up living a life of poverty, struggling to make ends meet. Amanda's dementia worsened, and Brian had to care for her daily.
Jack, find a wife quickly and relieve me of this burden. I can't. I'm too busy earning money for our living expenses to think about love.
The daily struggles kept piling up stress for Jack. Despite knowing it was partially his father's fault, Jack still grumbled.
Whose fault do you think it is that we're in this situation? Why don't you go back to your old job or beg them to let you work again? No way. I've worked enough for a lifetime. I want to relax in my old age. Besides, I can't leave your mother alone. Who knows what she might do?
Brian had been despised at his previous job due to his arrogant attitude. He was nearly a do-nothing employee for the last 5 years before retirement. Jack, unaware of this, kept pushing for his father to work again, leading to daily arguments. After about 6 months, their savings were completely gone.
What now? We have no money left.
Their arguments became more frequent, but their financial situation didn't improve. In fact, it continued to worsen. With no savings left, they lived solely on Jack's earnings, but it wasn't enough. And so Jack began borrowing money.
I should be able to repay it with the next bonus.
But when the time came, the company's performance had declined and the bonus was much smaller than expected. Jack couldn't repay his debt, and their situation became even more dire. Realizing they couldn't continue like this, Jack and his father decided to sell the house. They moved into an old apartment with low rent, but the living conditions were poor. The neighbors were loud, and the quality of life had significantly dropped.
I can't sleep with the neighbors making so much noise. I'd rather pay more and go back to the old house.
If you feel that way, why don't you work too? The argument over the noisy neighbors led to them bickering louder than the neighbors themselves. They were even scolded by the landlord. The change in the environment made Amanda's condition worse, and she started behaving erratically.
I can't handle this anymore. She needs to go to a nursing home.
Brian finally reached his breaking point and placed Amanda in a care facility. They thought it would relieve them, but the costs were higher than expected.
It costs this much for Mom's care? I can't even think about what it'll cost for Dad later.
Jack was horrified at the thought of his father also needing care in the future.
Dad, maybe we don't need to live together anymore. What are you talking about, Jack?
Jack suggested they separate, thinking it would be easier for him. But his father firmly refused.
You're just trying to make things easier for yourself. I won't allow it.
Jack secretly fled in the middle of the night, leaving his father behind. He was initially thrilled to have gained his freedom, but it didn't last. Though he was now alone, he still had debts and had to pay for his mother's care. Moreover, since he fled without taking anything, he had to buy all new furniture, further increasing his expenses. Meanwhile, Brian, who had been abandoned, was in an even worse situation. With no income, he reluctantly decided to work, but his attitude got him constantly scolded by younger employees.
I'm older than you. Why do I have to be yelled at? Show some respect to your elders.
Instead of reflecting on his behavior, he became even more arrogant. This led to him being told not to return to work anymore. He started spending recklessly at bars to relieve his stress, which only made things worse. Unable to pay rent, he was eventually evicted and ended up living on the streets. He's now known as the loud old man for shouting complaints at passerby and yelling about society's injustice. Jack and my in-laws were selfish and stubborn, leading them to a miserable life. I feel no pity for them and believe they deserve to suffer more and truly reflect on their actions. Right after the divorce, I often thought that way. But now I barely think about Jack and his parents anymore. That's because I'm too busy to dwell on the past. My business has become even more successful, and I'm occupied with work every day. Instead of spending time on revenge, I want to focus on my employees and the people around me now. This determination has made me want to cherish my current relationships. Because of this, magazines and media have started featuring me as a female entrepreneur to watch. This exposure has boosted my sales even more, and my life continues to thrive. I'm sure more opportunities will come my way, and when the time is right, I hope to meet someone better than Jack. I'm determined to live a better life and not let that marriage be my last.
My sister-in-law demanded the inheritance and told me to leave. I left, and a week later, she kept calling.
I'll get straight to the point. Hand over all the money.
What? Money?
Don't pretend you don't understand. I'm taking over the finances now.
You? Handling the finances? You're just a sister-in-law. Don't overstep your bounds. You haven't been here in 10 years, so why now?
Are you refusing to comply?
Why would I follow your orders?
You have no choice. Look at you, all confused.
The moment I saw her smug, sneering face, something inside me snapped. Follow her orders? To this selfish woman? No way will I let her take my precious money and time. She'll regret this. My name is Susan. Last week, on my 65th birthday, my husband's health took a sudden turn for the worse and he passed away. Since then, everything has been so hectic that I haven't had a moment to mourn. Today is finally the wake. I stood there staring at my husband's peaceful face in the casket. I still can't believe this happened so suddenly. Just the other day, he was talking about how he wanted to start walking so we could enjoy traveling together in our retirement, or how he wanted to improve his cooking skills and asked me to teach him, or how he wanted to pick up photography again, which had been his hobby. He talked so cheerfully about wanting to study it again. We both believed we still had so many years ahead of us. I felt tears welling up and took a deep breath. I can't keep feeling down forever. I can't make him worry about leaving us. He'd be concerned about his mother, who has lived with us for years. But I promised him I would take care of her so he shouldn't worry. It seems unfair that he left before his mother, though. My mother-in-law, Lisa, has mild dementia. She repeats stories from the past and sometimes forgets things or mixes people up. Sometimes she acts like a child lost in her imagination or being stubborn. Her legs and back are weak, so she needs help with dressing and using the restroom. But I've been caring for her for 7 years, so I'm used to it. Life with just me and she will surely be lonelier than before. But when it gets too lonely, I'll ask her to tell me stories of my husband's childhood. The funeral and cremation went smoothly. I've finished all the remaining procedures and tasks, and my short break is over. I balance my part-time job, household chores, and taking care of Lisa. Life has returned to its usual routine. My husband was such a quiet and natural presence that it still doesn't feel like anything has changed. Lisa seems to be acting normal, but I think she's sadder than I am. She sits with an old photo album she pulled from the closet, talking to my husband as he was in her memories. On the days I go to work, I have a helper take care of her. It's only a few times a week, but it earns me some pocket money and serves as a break. Staying busy with work is better than being home all the time. I recently returned to work, completed my usual tasks, did some shopping before it got dark, and headed home. When I got home, I realized that I still shop as if my husband were here. I bought too much food. My husband was always a big eater, so now there are leftovers. And again, I feel that wave of loneliness. "I'm home," I said quietly as I entered the house. It was so soft that Lisa couldn't hear it, so I didn't expect a response. But suddenly I heard a cheerful, unfamiliar woman's voice inside the house. Who could it be? "Hello? Who's here?" I called out, entering the house.
It's me, Mary.
"Mary? How did she get in? Did she use a spare key? I've never given her a key before, so what is she doing here without notice?" I wondered if it was an emergency, but she didn't seem worried. She was lounging on the sofa watching TV. My discomfort grew seeing her so at ease in my house. What are you doing in my house?" I demanded.
Do I need permission to come to my own family home?
She replied with irritation. "Shouldn't you at least call first?" I wanted to say, but I held back.
I came to check on things,
she continued, ignoring my discomfort. I kept my mouth shut, trying not to escalate things. She's over 10 years younger than my late husband, still barely in her 40s, and sees herself as bubbly and sociable. But to me, she's loud and obnoxious. She's always clashed with my late father-in-law, which is why she left the house and cut ties when she got married. She didn't even attend to her father's funeral 5 years ago. I don't know why she hated him so much, but she suddenly showed up at my husband's funeral, making a scene by loudly reminiscing with friends and relatives. I heard rumors that she's bad with money, with some saying she even borrowed money behind her husband's back. I can see that being true.
Where were you, Susan? She asked abruptly.
I was at work, I replied.
How could you leave Mom alone in the house?
Don't make it sound like that. I had a helper stay with her while I was out.
Paying for a helper while you work a part-time job? Doesn't that defeat the purpose? You should just stay home and take care of Mom yourself.
I was taken aback. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've balanced my part-time job and caring for Lisa for years. You left the house when you were young. Why do you suddenly care now? I retorted, feeling my frustration rise.
I thought you'd be struggling now that John's gone, but you're already back to work. Do you even care about Mom?
What?
You're shirking your duties as a daughter-in-law, she said coldly.
I was shocked. Why was I being attacked like this?
Now that John's gone, I'm worried about leaving the house and Mom to you, the daughter-in-law,
she continued. I was stunned. Why was she calling me just the daughter-in-law? Yes, John is gone, but I have my pension, savings, and enough to live comfortably. I've been caring for Lisa for 7 years now. Her words were insulting.
Since I came all this way, you should give me my share, she said, holding out her hand.
Your share? What are you talking about?
My share of John's inheritance. I'm his sister, so half of it is mine, right? She said, shaking her hand as if asking for change.
Half?
Yes, half, she repeated, smirking.
I think you're mistaken, I said firmly. You don't have a share of the inheritance.
What? What do you mean?
Siblings aren't entitled to inheritances. Unless there's no other family, I explained. And Lisa is still alive and well.
But the house will be mine eventually, right? Mom has an inheritance share, doesn't she?
Lisa is still alive, so there's no inheritance to discuss, I repeated.
Well, she won't be alive forever, Mary snapped. When she's gone, this house will be mine, so you should leave.
Mary's logic was twisted, but she did have a point. I remembered when my father-in-law passed. She refused her inheritance share due to bad relations and his business debts.
I don't want any inheritance, she has said back then. I know there are debts. Just because I married into a wealthy family doesn't mean I have to pay them. Leave me out of it.
Now here she was, suddenly interested because John was gone. I explained calmly that she had no claim, but the more I explained, the angrier she got. Just then, Lisa called for me from her room. I excused myself and went to help her, but when I returned, Mary was gone. I looked around and noticed several of Lisa's antique vases, which she cherished, were missing. When did this happen? Mary must have taken them. How dare she complain about inheritance and then steal from her own mother? I didn't want to believe it, but she was the only one here.
Susan, what's wrong?
Lisa asked, noticing my expression. Oh, Mary was just here. She said she was worried about us.
Oh, really? She replied. Next time, make sure to tell me when she comes.
5 days later, Mary showed up again without notice. This time she brought movers with her and had piled up boxes outside the house. Mary, what's with all these boxes? I asked, panicking. She ignored me, directing the movers.
Heavy things go inside, but be quiet. There's an elderly person here.
Wait a minute. You can't just do this without asking, I protested, blocking the movers from entering the house.
Isn't it obvious I'm moving in?
Moving in? What about your own house? I demanded.
I divorced my husband and came back here for the sake of this house, she declared.
I was speechless. You divorced?
Yes, last week, for the sake of this house,
she repeated. You're moving in here?
Of course, and I expect you to handle all the caregiving and housework.
And you'll do what? Earn money? Help with expenses?
That's not my job,
she replied indignantly. Her words made no sense. I needed to calm down and think. Mary, what happened to Lisa's collection of vases? I asked, suddenly remembering.
I sold them to cover moving costs,
she said without a hint of shame. Sold them?
Yes, it's my family's house. I can do what I want with what's inside,
she said smugly. I was shocked into silence. I decided to get Lisa and let her know, but Mary stopped me.
Wait, I'll tell her. It's better coming from me than a daughter-in-law.
I realized she was scared of what Lisa would say. Mary pointed to John's study, still half organized. Mary, please don't put anything in this room, I requested.
Why not? I'm moving in, she retorted. It's a nice room with good sunlight.
It might be your family home, but I've lived here for decades too. You can't just come in and take over without notice.
Let's be clear. Hand over all the money, she demanded again.
Money? What are you talking about? I asked, bewildered.
The house is money. All of it, she insisted.
What? All of it? That doesn't make any sense.
I told you, as the rightful heir, I will manage everything from now on, she smirked.
Are you out of your mind? I snapped. I'll tell you this now. I'm not listening to you. I said calmly. I'll leave this house immediately. Seeing my reaction, Mary's smile disappeared.
What are you talking about? What will you do with Mom? She demanded.
Just as you said, I'm just a daughter-in-law. I'll leave everything to you now, I replied, grabbing my things and preparing to leave.
What a heartless woman,
Mary shouted after me as I left the house. Good luck handling everything now, I muttered under my breath. A week later, I had 50 missed calls on my phone. It was Mary.
Susan, please help me,
she begged when I finally answered. Help you? Why would I do that?
We're family, aren't we?
She insisted. Family? After all you've done? I replied coldly.
I'm begging you, she sobbed. I don't know what to do.
Maybe you should think about why you're in that situation, I replied.
Please, she cried. Mom is so demanding. She keeps shouting orders at me.
Oh, didn't you know? Her dementia has improved a lot, I said.
Really?
She said, surprised.
I thought she was just staying quiet in her room.
Oh no, she's been playing online games to stay sharp, I explained.
Games?
Mary sounded even more confused. Yes, ever since the helper suggested it, she's been getting better, I said.
But she's so demanding,
Mary wailed. Well, she has a lot of energy now, I replied. Lisa, do you have something to say to Mary? I called out.
Yes, I heard everything. Don't be so high and mighty, Mary. Susan's been doing everything right.
I smiled, knowing Lisa had my back. And by the way, I added, we're moving out tomorrow. You should leave too.
Moving out?
She gasped. Yes, we've sold this house, I explained. We're moving to a senior-friendly apartment.
What? How could you sell this house without my permission?
She yelled. It's Lisa's house, not yours, I replied calmly. You have no right to decide anything here.
But this is my family home,
she protested. Not anymore, I said firmly. Get out before you become an intruder, I added, my patience wearing thin.
This isn't over.
she screamed as she stomped out. Good luck, I said quietly as I closed the door behind her. Life will go on just fine without her.
Isn't that old lady just annoying and in the way? Wouldn't it feel so much better if she wasn't around?
I caught her in the act, causing trouble, and she just shamelessly justifies her actions. She's not just any part-timer. She brags that she's the daughter of a big shot at the head office, which makes it even worse. But Jessica doesn't understand. The person she's been picking on isn't just any old woman. After every storm, there's a rainbow, and I'm counting on that rainbow to appear in Jessica's dark cloud. I'm Karen Williams. I'm in my 40s and a housewife who loves frugal cooking. I got married in my 30s and my husband and I have 2 kids. When our youngest entered elementary school, I started working part-time at a local grocery store. Balancing work and home life was tough, but my husband helped out, so I managed to keep going. A few years after I started working, my hard work was recognized and I was promoted to a full-time position through the employee promotion program. What began as a way to supplement our household income has now become much more. The full-time staff includes the manager, myself, and 3 kitchen staff. All other workers are part-time employees. Some work to earn pocket money. Others work to cover their children's extracurricular expenses. Among them, the oldest is Mary Johnson. I heard she recently returned 77, but she is incredibly lively. She doesn't necessarily look especially young, but she always exudes a certain dignity. Yet she never loses her smile. If she's really 77, she's older than my mom, but she doesn't look it. The younger part-timers call her Grandma Mary. It's short for Grandma Mary Johnson. I thought it was a bit rude, but she uses it herself sometimes, saying Grandma Mary can handle it. So I sometimes call her that too. One day, a new part-timer was scheduled to join us. When did we have an interview, I thought. I didn't remember seeing anything on the interview schedule. The manager mentioned the new hire, Jennifer, on her first day.
Oh, Karen, starting today, we have a new part-timer, Jennifer Miller. Be sure to treat her well.
Of course, but why is that? I asked.
Actually, Jennifer is the daughter of Mr. James, the head of sales at headquarters. He called the other day and arranged for her to work here.
So she got the job without an interview? I replied. I understand. But she will work just like everyone else, right? It doesn't matter who she is, as long as she does her job properly, there's no problem. However, Jennifer turned out to be a troublemaker. On her first day, she was supposed to be in by 8:30 for the early shift. I was assigned to train her. I hoped she would quickly learn stocking and cashier duties. But 15 minutes after her start time, she still hadn't arrived. I checked with the manager to see if there had been any contact from her, but there wasn't. Shall I try calling her? I asked.
Well, it's her first day. Let's wait a bit longer,
he replied. And another 10 minutes passed, and Jennifer finally showed up, just 5 minutes before the store opened. She was in her 20s, but looked like a college student, complete with cute nails. Despite being late, she didn't seem flustered at all. Jennifer, what happened? Was there an accident? I was worried and asked.
No, nothing,
she said, not showing any remorse. You know you were supposed to be here by 8:30 for the early shift, right?
Oh, was I?
Sorry, I'll be careful next time, she replied casually. I thought, is she not reflecting on her actions at all? Anyway, let's make sure she learns her job properly, I decided. So I started explaining how to stock shelves.
But isn't it already opening time? So most of the work is done, right? I guess there's nothing for me to do today,
she said, not really listening. It was then that Grandma Mary, who had just finished stocking and returned to the back room, chimed in.
Are you the new part-timer?
She asked.
Listen to the staff explaining things to you. Good luck,
she encouraged Jennifer. Grandma Mary wasn't scolding her. She was just her usual cheerful self, giving advice. But Jennifer muttered,
What's with that old lady? I don't need any advice from a regular old woman.
At that moment, I just thought, is this how young people are these days? Right after their first encounter, Jennifer seemed to start seeing Grandma Mary as an enemy. For the next day, Jennifer stopped being late, but her work was far from commendable. She kept playing with her phone and never took the initiative to start any tasks. I spoke to the manager about it, but he was known for avoiding conflict.
Oh, Jennifer, don't worry. I'll talk to her. Just keep doing your job as usual.
Will you really talk to her? I doubted him.
Look, Karen, I told you before, Jennifer is Mr. James's daughter. We don't want any trouble that might get us in trouble with other stores. So just don't cause any problems, okay?
Cause any problems? But even if she's the daughter of someone important, if she's earning money, she needs to work properly. This is hopeless, I thought, as the situation continued to deteriorate. Jennifer started acting more and more entitled, even though she didn't do her job. Since the manager allowed it, no other staff member corrected her. On the contrary, Jennifer started bragging about her father being a department head and began pushing her tasks onto others. Other staff, not wanting to get fired, started doing what Jennifer asked. Some even acted like sycophants, trying to stay on her good side. But even in that environment, Grandma Mary was the only one who treated Jennifer normally.
Hey, old lady, are you bored? Great. Could you stock that shelf for me? Jennifer asked, pushing her tasks onto Mary.
What are you talking about? If you don't do it yourself, you won't learn how to organize things. If you need help, I'll teach you, but go ahead and give it a try,
she advised calmly. Grandma Mary's presence was reassuring to me. Meanwhile, Jennifer seemed increasingly irritated with Mary for not giving her special treatment. One day, an incident occurred. Grandma Mary and I entered the locker room for lunch and saw that her locker was open and its contents were spilled onto the floor. Scattered on the floor were her wallet, notebook, and lunchbox, the latter with its contents spilled everywhere. Seeing the spilled food, I immediately recognized it as Grandma Mary's frugal cooking. This is terrible. Mary, please check if anything's missing. Who could have done this? I exclaimed. As I said this, Jennifer and another staff member walked into the locker room.
What happened here? Wow, this is tragic, Jennifer sneered. And it smells too. Such pitiful food scattered all over.
Oh dear, I'm sorry. It looks like my things fell out of my locker, and my lunch tipped over too, Mary said lightly.
Oh, so it's your lunch, Grandma. No wonder it smells like old people's food, Jennifer laughed. Hurry up and clean it up. I need to eat my lunch too, and I can't relax with this mess around, she continued.
Excuse me, I was about to scold her, but Mary gently grabbed my arm and spoke up instead.
You're right. It's lunchtime after all. I'll clean this up right away, she said, calmly starting to clean up. I helped her clean up quickly, then I asked, Mary, what will you do for lunch now? I have some chips if you want. Those are your lunch, dear. You should eat them or you won't have energy for the afternoon. I'll go buy something now. Thank you for helping, she said, smiling. As she left the room, I heard Jennifer mutter, So annoying. This sort of bizarre behavior continued 3 more times, with Mary cleaning up and Jennifer making snide comments each time. I spoke to the manager about it. Isn't it strange that Mary's belongings are scattered on the floor every time? Someone must be doing this, I said. Oh, Mary's things just fell out, right? She's an elderly woman after all. Maybe she didn't put them back in properly, he laughed.
But it's strange that it happens every time. Don't you think someone is behind this? I asked, frustrated.
Oh, you're overthinking it. Besides, we don't want to cause any trouble with Mr. James's daughter around. Let's just keep things smooth, he said dismissively. Keep things smooth? I'm bringing this up because there is already trouble, I thought, losing hope in the manager. Who could be doing this, I wondered. The answer seemed obvious, but there was no proof. Then one day I stumbled upon a surprising opportunity. I entered the locker room during a bathroom break before lunch and sensed someone was inside. It was before lunch break, so the early shift should have already left. Could I be catching the locker vandal in the act? I thought, activating my phone's camera and opening the door quietly. And there was Jennifer, standing in front of Mary's locker fiddling with something. Crash! I heard something fall. I looked down and saw Mary's bag contents scattered on the floor. She had tipped the bag upside down, spilling everything out. Then she kicked the lunchbox, muttering,
That old lady is such annoying.
Got you, I exclaimed, confronting Jennifer. Jennifer, it was you all along. She turned around in shock, her eyes wide and her face different from her usual expression.
Oh, Karen, what are you doing here? She stammered.
I just happened to come in, I replied. But what's going on here? You've been doing this all along, haven't you? I pressed.
Well, yes, but please forgive me. I won't do it again, she said, smiling sheepishly. Isn't that old lady just a nuisance? She's so old and still working part-time. Doesn't that mean she was useless before? She continued. I mean, don't you think it would be better if she wasn't here?
What are you saying? Mary's a valued staff member. I shot back. Is this how you treat people you don't like? I'm going to tell the manager and make sure you apologize to Mary properly.
Oh, really, Karen?
She sneered, her face changing into a threatening expression.
Do you think that's a good idea? My dad could have you fired in a snap.
Enough, I said firmly. I've recorded everything you did just now on my phone. I'll show this evidence to the manager and report it to the headquarters. Just then the lunch break started and Mary walked in. I was about to speak up, but Jennifer was quicker.
I saw Karen do it, she accused.
Before I could respond, Jennifer ran out, saying,
I'm going to tell the manager.
I couldn't just leave Mary alone. Mary, it wasn't me. It was Jennifer. I have proof, I explained.
It's okay, I believe you,
Mary smiled, even before seeing the evidence.
Were you trying to stop Jennifer from me?
She asked. Of course, it's awful to see this happening. You're just doing your job.
I see, Mary nodded. But this will only cause you trouble. Before Jennifer tells the manager, you should show him the proof,
she advised. You're right, I agreed, heading to the manager's office. But Jennifer had already gotten there first and was fake crying in front of the manager.
Karen, I heard what happened. You were the one doing this in the locker room, right?
The manager said calmly. Do you really believe that? I asked, stunned.
Sir, trust me, no matter how much of a full-timer she is it right for her to treat a part-timer like this?
Jennifer whined.
I'll tell my father about this.
She threatened again. Sir, Jennifer is the culprit. I have proof, I insisted, showing him the images on my phone.
Let me see,
the manager said, taking my phone and looking at the images. But then I heard a click.
There's no such image,
he said, looking confused. I quickly grabbed my phone back and checked, only to find the images had been deleted. Did you delete the proof? I asked the manager.
What are you talking about? I didn't do anything,
he said defensively.
Did you lie about having proof and now want to blame me for deleting it?
Yeah, Karen, that's really cruel of you,
Jennifer added, pretending to cry again.
Right, we might have to report this to headquarters, but maybe Mr. James won't say anything if Jennifer forgives you. How about it, Jennifer?
He asked, looking at her. Jennifer lifted her face from her fake crying and smirked.
Yeah, if she apologizes and changes her attitude from now on, maybe it's fine.
Great! Then Karen, apologize here and now. If you don't, you might have to quit today,
he threatened. What? Why should I quit when I've done nothing wrong? I asked, enraged. This manager just wants to please Mr. James, I realized. I'm so angry I could scream, but I can't just quit out of spite. But apologizing would be unbearable. I can't let this brat win. Just then, a knock came at the door.
Manager, wait a moment,
said a firm voice. To my surprise, it was Mary. She wasn't smiling like usual. Mary stood tall, exuding a commanding presence. The manager seemed taken aback by Mary's unusual demeanor, as silence filled the room.
Oh, Mary, I heard from Jennifer that Karen's been harassing you, right?
The manager tried to explain.
Sir, the culprit behind the locker incidents is not Karen, Mary declared. The real culprit is Jennifer,
she said with authority.
What?
The manager and Jennifer were both stunned.
What's this old lady talking about?
Jennifer yelled, showing her true colors.
Trying to make herself look important? I'll make you pay, she threatened.
Silence,
Mary ordered, glaring sharply at the manager. Everyone was frozen by Mary's intensity.
Jennifer is indeed the locker vandal. I saw it with my own eyes. And Karen took a video as proof, she continued. What?
The manager and Jennifer both looked even more shocked.
The video has already been sent to the HR department at headquarters, Mary revealed. What? You sent it to the headquarters?
The manager gasped.
This store's wrongdoing is not known, she said firmly.
Actually, before I gave the proof to Mary for safekeeping, I recalled. Just in case I thought it would be better to inform the victim Mary after all. I had no idea it would be useful in this way. And I didn't miss what you said earlier. Sir, you said you sent it to headquarters, referring to the proof images. So you must have seen the evidence, I pressed again.
The
manager stuttered.
I heard everything you said earlier, right outside the office,
Mary added.
I recorded it and sent it along with the video,
she stated firmly. The manager was speechless.
Oh, come on,
he muttered under his breath. Jennifer, still not grasping the situation, said,
Manager, contact HR and tell them it was a mistake. If you do that, everything will be fine,
she insisted. The manager picked up the phone to try, but Mary stopped him.
That's unnecessary. They should be arriving soon,
she said calmly.
Arriving who?
Everyone wondered. Right then, there was a knock at the door. Mary nodded, and 2 men walked in. The manager gasped.
Oh, Mr. Smith from HR. Why are you here?
Mr. Smith was the head of HR, someone store staff rarely interacted with. He was a man in his 50s with well-groomed silver hair, looking every bit like a capable executive. Another person with him seemed to be an HR staff member. I wondered why such high-ranking people had come here.
Hello, everyone. We came here urgently to do reports of unfair treatment at this store.
But why did he come so urgently, I wondered. Still thinking he could talk his way out, the manager said,
Oh yes, we've had some locker incidents. It seems there's a disagreement between Karen and Jennifer about who's responsible. Enough with the lies. We know everything,
Mary interrupted with a stern voice. Mr. Smith nodded gravely in agreement.
Oh no,
the manager muttered, realizing he was caught.
Jennifer, still clueless, said to Mr. Smith, "Nice to meet you. I'm Jennifer James, daughter of Mr. James from the sales department. I'm innocent, right?" she added, clueless about the seriousness. Is she really saying this to the head of HR? I thought, shocked.
Only you think that,
Mr. Smith replied, cutting down Jennifer's naive assumption. "But I'm the daughter of a department head," she insisted.
And so what? Mr. Smith said bluntly. You and the manager here are both employees, regardless of your family ties.
To hear him speak to Jennifer like that, Mr. Smith is truly HR's top man, I thought. "Sir, who is this guy?" Jennifer asked, her voice pitiful.
Jennifer, this person doesn't care about your connections,
the manager admitted. "What?" Jennifer exclaimed, disbelieving. Wrapping up, Mr. Smith turned to the manager.
We'll be conducting an investigation,
he said.
Karen, I'd like you to step in as acting manager while this is resolved,
he announced. Me? Acting manager? I asked, surprised.
Yes, you've shown good judgment and leadership. After completing a few trainings, we're looking to promote you to manager, he explained.
I'd be honored. Thank you, I said. But there are still so many things I don't understand. Mr. Smith, why was this resolved so quickly, and why did you arrive so fast? I asked. He glanced at Mary.
All thanks to her, he said.
Mary? Everyone turned to look at Mary, who just smiled. Why is Mr. Smith saying that about her? I wondered. Unable to hold back his curiosity, the manager asked.
Mr. Smith, do you know Mary? Or is she a relative or something? Of course not,
Mr. Smith replied calmly.
Mary was our former CEO's wife.
Mary was the former CEO's wife? I thought, stunned, as did others. The CEO's wife? Why would someone like her be working as a part-timer? Jennifer blurted out. Mr. Smith turned to Jennifer and calmly explained.
Mary works here by choice. Our store began as a small business, and she was one of its original staff members. Yes, it was tough back then, but I enjoyed it. I continue working to keep that spirit alive, Mary said. But Mary went through a normal hiring process, didn't she? The manager questioned. I did apply normally and was hired like anyone else, Mary confirmed. Of course, HR found out soon after. Mary never used her status as the former CEO's wife to exert any influence, Mr. Smith said. This is the first time we've ever had an issue like this. I just thought it was good to see Mr. Smith has grown so much, Mary said with a smile. And so the locker room incident was resolved. Jennifer quit before she could be officially reprimanded and moved away. I was promoted to acting manager a week later, as Mr. Smith had suggested. Even though it's busier, it's much more fulfilling. Jennifer ended up at a rival store where she quickly earned a bad reputation and moved away with her family. Our former manager was transferred to a different store as a regular employee. Mr. James from headquarters was demoted to store manager due to his abuse of power. Since then, the company has focused on creating a transparent workplace environment. And Mary, she continues to work energetically at the store. I thanked her for everything she did, and she humbly replied, I didn't do anything special. I just reached out to an old acquaintance. And so, all was settled. Several years later, I joined the headquarters sales department. My work as a store manager had been recognized. Now I handle new manager training and inventory management. And while the work is different, it's still satisfying. Every day is fulfilling, just as Mary has said. You have to do what you want to do while you still can.
My mother-in-law spent from our joint account and said, Aren't you glad you married my son? I replied, I regret it.
You're lucky to have married my son. Don't take advantage of this situation. Make sure to serve us well. I could almost hear the sneering sound effect as Amelia smiled with an ill-intentioned grin. Knowing that $15,000 was deposited monthly into our joint account, she repeatedly indulged in extravagant shopping. And the words she threw at me were what she just said. What a patronizing way to speak. I took a deep breath and said, I regret it. Amelia's eyes widened as she looked at me in disbelief. What are you talking about? I can't understand why Amelia believed she could freely use the $15,000 without any doubt. Actually, about that $15,000. The next moment, Amelia's expression crumbled, realizing an unimaginable truth. My name is Emily Austin. I work as a freelance designer from home, while living with Amelia, whom I despise. I'm fed up with my days filled with sighs, regretting the shallow actions of my past self that led to this situation. The turning point of my life came a year and a half ago when I met my husband, Mark. Having just turned 33, I was feeling anxious about not having had a single boyfriend. Everyone around me was getting married, and some friends who had early pregnancies and births now had children in junior high school.
Out of a sense of urgency, I ended up attending a group blind date that I would normally refuse. And that's where I met Mark. While he wasn't particularly handsome, he was very considerate and polite in his interactions with women. I naturally found myself drawn to those qualities. It seemed Mark was also interested in me, as he asked to exchange contact information just before the group date ended. Having no particular reason to refuse, I agreed, and from then on, we began meeting just the two of us. And 6 months after we met, we started dating with the premise of marriage. A few months later, we got married. Up until that point, things were going well. I felt like I was at the pinnacle of my life, finally feeling I had achieved a normal level of happiness. But hell came suddenly.
My mom's been living alone back in my hometown, but she's getting old, so we've decided to live together.
And that's news to me. I couldn't help but argue back. Wait a minute, how could you decide something so important on your own? Are you ignoring my wishes? In your hometown, isn't it? We were living in New York. I was born and raised in New York, but Mark was from the Midwest. It's not that I didn't want to go to his hometown, but it was shocking to be completely ignored and pushed to move suddenly and live together. Mark seemed annoyed, furrowing his brow.
What, do you hate the idea of living with my mom that much? Oh, I get it. You don't like my mom, huh?
The kind Mark I once knew was gone, and after we got married, he suddenly changed, becoming almost like a different person. But it wasn't that. Mark was probably always like this. He just pretended to be someone else to get married, and I was fooled by that. No, it's not like I dislike your mom. Even though I said that, I had a bit of a dislike toward Amelia. When we visited her to introduce ourselves for the wedding, she looked at me and sneered.
Oh, I heard you're from the city, but you look more like a country bumpkin than I thought. So you're a designer? Not bad, but not impressive either. Everything about you is just so-so. Frankly, you're not a good match for my son, Mark.
It's not easy to just brush off some comments with as simple as that so. Only someone with a steel mentality could do that. Because of such incidents, I wanted to limit my interactions with Amelia as much as possible. But for Mark, my internal struggles didn't matter at all. To him, I wasn't treated as a beloved wife, but rather more like a convenient housekeeper. In the end, my opinions were never heard, and we ended up moving to Mark's hometown in the Midwest. I suddenly started living with Amelia in an unfamiliar place, facing immense stress. However, Mark didn't consider my feelings at all and said something unbelievable.
Starting next Monday, I'll be on an overseas assignment. I probably won't be back for a while. Regarding living expenses, I'll transfer money to my mom's account, so manage it together.
This happened just a week after we started living here. Shocked by the sudden announcement, I hesitantly spoke. Oh, wait a minute. We've only just started living here a week ago, and now you're going overseas next week? This isn't something you decided just yesterday. Why are you telling me this now?
If I had told you earlier, you would have run away.
I wondered why I ever married such a man. While I was driven by self-blame, Mark left. Now I had to live with Amelia, whose first impression was the worst, just the two of us. Moreover, Mark said he would send money directly to Amelia's account instead of mine. That's just unbelievable, to say the least. Feeling helpless, I stared out the window, watching Amelia chat happily with the neighbors. 2 weeks had passed since Mark left, and during that time, my mental state deteriorated to the point where I couldn't even focus on work. The reason was that there was something constantly getting in my way. After a while, I heard the sound of the front door opening and footsteps coming up the stairs. Then, without knocking, the door flew open. Standing there was none other than Amelia.
Oh, are you hiding in your room again, playing on your computer? You say it's work, but can you really make money doing that? Honestly, Mark said he caught a convenient woman, but when you open the lid, this is what you get? At least it would have been nice if you were pretty.
Amelia's daily routine was to torment her daughter-in-law. She divorced a long time ago and apparently hasn't been in contact since. As a housewife with no hobbies except supporting her favorite idols, tormenting me was her way of killing time. She would often come and say things like she had been talking to a neighbor earlier.
You know, the wife over there is amazing. She's a doctor. Despite her hard work, she recently opened her own clinic nearby. If you're lucky, you might end up going there too. That is, if Mark doesn't abandon you first.
Satisfied, she left the room after saying that, only to come back 2 hours later to spew more insults. I sighed deeply, having had enough. If I tried to work at a cafe to get away from it all, she'd scold me for wasting money and being indulgent. That's why when I stayed home, she'd call me a shut-in and a bum, chipping away at my mental state. My patience was at its limit. Even though I wanted a divorce, there was nothing I could do while Mark was overseas. Before marriage, Mark had kept his true nature thoroughly hidden. Without a full investigation, I couldn't have seen his true self. So in the end, I was deceived. My empty words echoed through the quiet room. Letting out yet another sigh, I stared at the bank book Amelia had given me for the joint account. Are we supposed to live on this amount of money? My words went unheard, fading into the air. One day, Amelia ordered me to go shopping, so I headed to a supermarket about a 30-minute walk away. She said using the car would waste gas, and when I asked for a bike, she replied that it was too extravagant for a daughter-in-law to want. I wondered what era her mindset was stuck in as I walked. Suddenly, a middle-aged man walking in front of me collapsed to the ground as if pulled by gravity. Without thinking, I rushed to his side. "Hey, are you okay? Can you hear me? Are you alright?" I shouted loudly while shaking his shoulder, and the man opened his eyes slightly, groaning, but he seemed too dazed to answer my questions. Realizing it was an emergency, I immediately called for an ambulance. I moved him to a safe place and instructed a passerby who helped me. I performed CPR while waiting for the ambulance, which arrived in 6 minutes. I managed to hand the man over to the paramedics safely. I also got into the ambulance with him, being the first on the scene and needing to report the situation and the resuscitation steps to the medical staff. The man was taken to the hospital and immediately underwent emergency surgery. A few hours later, I was relieved to hear that he had regained consciousness. When I visited his private room, he looked at me with a kind expression.
"I'm alive thanks to you and your CPR."
Apparently, he had heard everything from the nurses. I just did what anyone should do. It wasn't something to be thanked for. I had some experience with CPR, and luckily, many people helped out because of the location. It wasn't just me who saved you. He smiled gently as I humbly spoke.
No, it's rare to act so quickly, and I was a complete stranger to you, yet you helped me. I'm truly grateful. Could you at least tell me your name?
I wanted to say it wasn't worth mentioning, but it felt out of character, so I told him my name. Hearing my surname, his eyes widened.
Could it be... Are you...
Surprised by the unexpected encounter, I widened my eyes too. We exchanged contact information before I left the hospital. He insisted on thanking me somehow, and since he wouldn't take no for an answer, I gave him my phone number. Later that evening, I remembered I was supposed to go shopping, so I hurried to run and get the things I was told to buy. When I got home, I was met by Amelia, looking like she was ready to explode.
"Where have you been wandering until this late? You can't even do a simple shopping task right. What a useless daughter-in-law. If you're given an order, you should follow it properly."
She ordered me to make dinner right away. It started again. When Amelia was in a bad mood, she would hurl insults at me and make me cook, only to throw the food away. That day too, she poured the food I had made down the drain.
"Who would eat such ugly-looking food? And now the sink is clogged. Clean it up right away."
She then casually ordered some expensive sushi, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and made me pay for it. What a troublesome Amelia. I held my head in my hands. The next day, I received a call from my husband, Mark.
Mom told me you've been doing awful things to her.
What are you talking about? Why would I do anything to her? But Mark didn't listen to anything I said and instead began to blame me based on what his mother had told him.
You're not even cooking properly, not cleaning, not even shopping right. Mom says you're adding to her burden, and it's becoming a problem.
For a moment, I thought Amelia was describing herself, but that wasn't it. She was only telling Mark what suited her. And I realized after marriage that Mark was the typical only child who adored his mother. He had a troublesome tendency to believe whatever his beloved mother said over my words. Instinctively, I knew that whatever I said now wouldn't reach him. As expected, before I could say anything, Mark continued.
I don't care about my love life or anything like that. As long as I have Mom, that's enough. But I can't handle everything on my own, so you married me to fill that gap. So do your duty as a wife, understand? That is the one thing you must absolutely do.
With that, Mark abruptly hung up the phone. The machine tone announcing the end of the call sounded unusually loud in my ear. Amelia, who must have been secretly listening, came out and opened her mouth with a sneering smile.
"Oh dear, you got a scolding from Mark? Well, it's all your fault. You're such a terrible daughter-in-law, not even doing the bare minimum, and being defiant towards me. I only told Mark because of that. I didn't ask him to scold you, but if that's what happened, then you should thoroughly reflect on yourself, Emily. Never defy my orders again."
She gave her final warning in a low, crawling voice. Yes, understood. I had no choice but to say that. After Amelia left, a tear ran down my cheek. I had tried to act strong, but my heart had long reached its limit. That confrontation had been the last straw, and my emotions overflowed, unable to stop. As I sobbed quietly, my phone rang, bringing me back to reality. I thought it might be Mark again, but the caller ID said Robert. It was the middle-aged man who had collapsed on the street. I quickly answered the phone, and after a brief hesitation, he asked me,
Were you crying?
My parents had passed away a few years ago, and I found myself overlapping Robert's image with that of my kind, reliable father, making me cry even more.
Bad timing, it seems. I was calling regarding the other day's matter.
No, it's fine. Right now, I'd rather talk to someone than be alone. Thinking that, I responded, and Robert continued speaking hesitantly.
About that matter, it's been completed, so please check it.
Huh? I thought that was a joke.
After saving my life and learning your suffering because of those two, I couldn't just stand by. Please use it without hesitation.
After hanging up, I checked on what Robert had mentioned. Realizing it was real, I was left speechless. But someone took this as a good thing. A few days later, I was at the bank's ATM corner with my passbook. When I tried to withdraw living expenses, an error occurred. The balance was insufficient. When I checked, there were only a few $100s left. Upon closer inspection, I saw a trace of money being withdrawn a few days earlier. It was done using a cash card, so it was undoubtedly Amelia's doing. I hurried back home, but Amelia wasn't there. After waiting for a while, she returned, carrying a bunch of shopping bags.
I finally got the goods I wanted. I also bought some brand name clothes. After all, having a high-earning, reliable son is the best, she said with a pleased expression as she entered the living room. Oh, you were here, Emily.
As soon as she saw me, her mood turned sour. I asked what all those shopping bags were. She answered that they were merchandise of a male idol she had been supporting for some time and foreign brand items. Why did you do that?
Why do you care, Emily? I used Mark's money so I don't have to explain myself to you.
So it was you who withdrew almost all the money from the joint account, wasn't it? Amelia laughed arrogantly.
Well, I thought I'd better withdraw it before you did.
I was planning to complain to Mark soon. He's quite strict about money matters, but I kept quiet until now. I knew my feelings would get across eventually.
I never thought there would be $15,000 deposited. Checking the balance with a cash card every day paid off.
Lately, Amelia often went out for short periods. I never thought she was checking the balance with a cash card. She must have been desperate for money. From here, Amelia's indulgent lifestyle began. Every month on the 15th, $15,000 was deposited, and she would immediately withdraw it to waste on extravagant purchases. She started living a lavish lifestyle. Recently, she had been going out more often at night, dressed in light clothing that young women in their 20s would wear, with dark red lipstick. She would come back late, usually around midnight, looking quite satisfied. This continued for 3 months until Amelia suddenly said something shocking.
You're lucky to have married my son. Since he went overseas, he's been making a lot of money. Oh, it must be because of how well I raised him. Lately, Emily, you haven't been arguing unnecessarily, and it's been so easy to live. As a housekeeper, you're not enough, but considering you're free, that's good enough. Emily, you must continue to serve us. That's your purpose in life.
Who does she think she is? Some cult leader? My purpose in life shouldn't be something Amelia decides. I was trembling with anger, but calmed myself down, knowing that the time wasn't right yet. Amelia had no idea what was about to happen, and her $15,000 lifestyle continued for a while. Then one day, the music stopped. Did you enjoy yourself, Amelia? I suddenly asked, and Amelia looked at me blankly.
What are you talking about?
You spent nearly $100,000 in total, haven't you? How was that dreamlike lifestyle? Did you honestly think it would last forever? My strange question deepened the frown on Amelia's face.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Instead, how could you still act like this after marrying my son? There's no man as wonderful as Mark.
Hearing his mother say that made me feel a chill. Well, it's time to teach her a lesson in reality. I started crying, began to speak like an actress. Oh, I really regret it. Why did I ever marry Mark? If I had married him, I wouldn't be feeling this miserable. At that moment, Amelia's eyebrows twitched.
What? Are you dissatisfied? I will never allow a divorce between Mark and you. Emily, you're a convenient daughter-in-law for us, so you can't escape. I don't mind going to court, but that would only be if you have the means to pay for the exorbitant costs.
She sounded so confident, but her expression froze the next moment. You and your son had a combined debt of $90,000, didn't you? But thanks to Robert, it's all sorted now.
How do you know that? Wait, how do you know about my ex-husband, Robert?
Amelia began to look anxious, something I'd never seen before. She seemed shocked to learn that I was in contact with Robert, Mark's father, and her ex-husband. I explained how I helped a man who collapsed in front of me while I was shopping. That man turned out to be Robert. He recognized my surname and realized I was married to Mark, his son. From there, things moved quickly. Robert knew I was married to his son, Mark. I also never expected the man I helped to be Mark's father. But perhaps it was fate's trickery. After being used and thrown into hell, fate brought me a savior. On that day, Robert proposed a plan to repay his gratitude for saving his life.
So you married Mark, and he has a debt of $40,000, while she has a debt of $50,000, totaling $90,000.
They had kept their debts hidden from each other. Mark has $40,000 in debt from gambling and credit card bills, while she borrowed $50,000 for her idol addiction. I discovered this through letters and reminder notices that came to the house. I didn't open them, but I hired a detective agency with my savings from when I was single to investigate their financial situation. I regretted not doing this before marriage, but I'm glad I did it now. I used the little money Mark sent me to gradually pay off the debts bit by bit. But as it became increasingly difficult to cover even living expenses with Amelia here, I thought about what to do. That's when I met Robert. And Robert had been transferring $14,000 every month to Amelia's account. He said it was his limit. He asked me to manage the repayment somehow. If he had sent it to Emily's account, there would have been gift tax issues, so he deliberately sent it to his ex-wife's account. He said he would clearly write on the memo line that it was for debt repayment, which could serve as proof. And he said once the total debt of $90,000 was completely repaid, the plan would be put into action. At first, Robert only sent $40,000, but saying he had a bit more flexibility, he managed to send the full $90,000 in about 4 months. Amelia, oblivious to all this, spent all the money meant for debt repayment. She crumpled to the floor, trembling.
That can't be. You tricked me.
Let me ask you, did you think it was okay to use a large sum of money deposited every month without any suspicion? For example, using money you knew was mistakenly deposited can be considered a crime, and there are cases where people have been arrested. As I said this, Amelia fell silent. She seemed to have realized something, and suddenly raised her head, whispering softly.
Wait, if that man has been sending $14,000 every month, then the remaining $1,000 is from Mark, isn't it?
To me, it seemed like she had only just realized this. Yes, that's right. And Mark's story about being overseas for work is a complete lie. I've already called him over here, so he should be arriving any minute now. At the same time I said that, I heard the front door open. Entering the house was Mark, looking pale and slightly trembling, accompanied by an angry Robert. This man has been giving only $1,000 a month to me and Amelia while giving $2,000 to his mistress for living expenses. The investigation didn't just reveal the debts. It also uncovered the fact that Mark's overseas work story was a lie and that he was actually living with a mistress. Mark knelt down on the spot, his voice shaking as he apologized to me.
I'm sorry I made a little mistake, so please forgive me regarding the alimony. You think you can be forgiven just like that? You're such a shallow person. It's embarrassing to think I raised someone like you.
Mark's father, Robert, was shouting at him, seeing his son after what must have been a long time. Amelia, witnessing the scene, could only watch in fear, trembling.
Emily saved my life, so I wanted to repay her by freeing her from this nightmare. That's why I sent a total of $90,000, but it seems she used it all. Her reckless spending habits are still the same. That was one of the reasons I divorced her. Or have you forgotten?
Amelia had no words to defend herself, her head lowered, mumbling excuses.
But I couldn't help it. What's wrong with spending the money that comes in?
Using money without understanding its source is never a good idea. As I said earlier, if it turns out to be someone else's money, and you're asked to return it but can't, you can be held accountable. That's a form of fraud. If you knowingly used it, you could be arrested. You've got what it takes to be a criminal, don't you?
As he snorted and said that, Amelia glared at me. This was probably the maximum resistance she could muster. But it didn't affect me at all. Normally, if a large sum of $15,000 is deposited, it would arouse suspicion. But she squandered it without question, proving her lack of common sense. Anyway, Robert and Mark had come in together, and now Mark was in a tight spot, realizing he was exposed for both infidelity and debt. His face turned pale, and he looked as though his soul had left his body. Looking at both of them, Robert sighed deeply.
As a former husband and a father, I've done what I should. The $90,000 was for them to resolve their debt, so they should handle the rest on their own. And since I've fulfilled my responsibility, Mark, you are now obliged to release Emily immediately. You must pay the alimony for your infidelity right here and now. You have no right to refuse.
Hearing this from Robert, Mark was flustered. Realizing that his debt would only increase if he didn't act now, he tried to avoid this at all costs.
Dad, come on. As my father, you should pay the alimony for me. I still have a lot of debt, and my girlfriend is pregnant, so I can't afford to spend money on this.
Hearing this made me snap, not Robert. While I was suffering, barely getting by, cutting into my savings, you were getting another woman pregnant, and now you're saying you can't afford to pay because money is important? And you think Robert, as your father, should pay? How pathetic. I was just ashamed of my past self for even liking a man like this for a second. As I said this, Mark's face turned bright red, like steam was coming out of his head.
Well, it's your fault for being fooled. She's younger and prettier and got pregnant right away. You're less than a housekeeper to me. Sue me for fraud if you want.
At that moment, a beep sounded in the room, the sound of a recording device. Good, I got your confession that you deceived me, recorded perfectly. Now I can demand additional compensation for the insult on top of the alimony. for your infidelity. Be prepared. Realizing he had dug his own grave, Mark hurriedly tried to deny it, but it was too late.
Did you forget what I do for a living? I'm a lawyer. As for Emily's case, I've promised to handle it for free. Mark, get ready.
At that moment, the defeat of Amelia and Mark was decided. After that, with Robert's full cooperation, the divorce was quickly finalized. We demanded and received full alimony payments from both Amelia and Mark in a lump sum. Naturally, they ended up taking on more debt, leading to a life in misery. They could no longer borrow from regular financial institutions, so they turned to dubious lenders. As for Mark, his life became increasingly difficult, and he began borrowing money from friends under various pretenses. His actions of borrowing money under false pretenses quickly became a problem, and he faced a group lawsuit demanding repayment. This also exposed his affair to his girlfriend. His girlfriend, who was also deceived into thinking he was single, was just as much a victim as I was. And with her being pregnant, Mark's actions were even more unforgivable. He found himself surrounded on all sides. Even his beloved mother, Amelia, abandoned him.
I'm doing my best to take care of myself, so I can't take care of Mark too.
This must have shocked Mark, who had always thought he was doing everything for his mother. He had been abandoned the moment he was no longer needed. Finally, forced to face reality, Mark now works tirelessly from morning till night to make amends for his wrongs. Of course, he broke up with his girlfriend and is now also paying child support, as well as repaying his friends with interest. As for Amelia, it seems she was going out at night to visit host clubs, spending about $100,000 on one particular host, relying on the mysterious $15,000 that was coming in every month. Her current whereabouts are unknown. Having received $90,000 without reporting it, she's now facing possible arrest for tax evasion. Rumors say she was called out by the host's establishment and sent overseas, but there are various speculations. But from my perspective, it's all in the past. I don't care about the end of a stranger. I hope she suffers and atones as much as possible. That's all there is to it. As for me, I'm back in New York living a peaceful life alone. I've made designing a side job and returned to my work as a nurse. One reason I had trouble meeting people was because of the demanding and regular nature of nursing. But now, having experienced marriage once, I've had enough. I decided to go back to being a nurse. But that's not all. After saving Robert that day, I strongly felt I wanted to be involved in nursing again. I still enjoy design, so I'm continuing that work on the side. This current environment is ideal for me. Occasionally, I still interact with Robert, and he shared an interesting story.
My divorce with my ex-wife was not just due to her spending habits, but also her infidelity. Mark is not my biological son. I'm taking steps to ensure he doesn't inherit a single cent from my estate.
Hearing that, I laughed, finally feeling certain of my victory.